Okay, well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the League of Women Voters of Michigan Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion team program. We're calling it Incorporating DEI into membership recruitment and the nominating committee's work. And I'm Mary Kay Oline Berkey, and I'll be your moderator this evening. I have a few housekeeping items. If anyone wishes to use closed captioning, they are available. If you go to the menu at the bottom of your screen and you go over to More on the far right-hand side, halfway up or halfway down is the word Captions. And if you click on that and you say Show Captions, it'll ask if you want it in English, and then it will show that it is enabled. If you don't want to see the captions, you simply go to that same captions menu item and click on Hide Captions, and they'll go away for you. They'll be available to anybody that wants to use them, but they will be not showing on your screen. So that's one item. Second item is we are recording this program. And the third thing is with regard to chat. We would ask that you not use chat while any of the panel members are talking because it can be disruptive, particularly for Kathy, who uses technology that would lead to her being able to hear what's being written in chat. So it's just easier if she, if we don't use chat while she's talking. So those are the housekeeping items. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists. All are members of the League in Michigan and have been involved in DEI initiatives at their local league, but also volunteering in other organizations with DEI initiatives. So let me introduce them at this point. We have Regina Nelson. Regina, you want to wave? And Patty O'Donnell and Kathy McAdam.
Hello.
Great. Okay. I'll introduce them in more detail as we have them give their opening remarks. Each of them are going to be making opening remarks, and they're going to address questions like, why did the organization that they're telling us about choose to focus on DEI? What diversity characteristics do they track? How do they address gaps in diversity? And how do they work toward diversity?
Being recorded.
Mary Kay, could everybody please mute themselves? Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to introduce Dr. Regina Nelson. She's a member of the League of Women Voters of Kalamazoo area, and she's been active in the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee and became our liaison to the Nominating Committee. She is still a member of the Nominating Committee locally and also at the League of Women Voters of Michigan. She's a professor of early childhood education at Western Michigan University and has served on a number of regional, state, and national early childhood organizations. Locally, she served on the board of the YWCA and also the Interfaith Strategy for Advocacy and Action in the Community, which we call ISAC. Each of those have DEI initiatives, and she's going to talk to us about those. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Regina for opening remarks.
Thank you, Mary Kay. Hello, everyone. As Mary Kay stated, currently I serve on the board of the YWCA, and our mission for the YWCA is eliminating racism and empowering women, and that's the YWCA Kalamazoo. And then also I'm the vice president for leadership development for Isaac. And so for that organization, we're a community organizing group, and we focus on changing systems, policies, and practices that support disparities due to gender, race, economics. And because of those missions, it's very important that our board represents the people that we're trying to support and help. And so for both of those things, we look for people on the board because they're going to be in decision-making positions to talk about practices and policies that will. So we need people who are sitting at that decision-making table who reflect the people that we're trying to help. Because we know sometimes when you're sort of removed from that population that you're trying to help, you may have good ideas about what works, but unless you're talking to those people or you're representative of those people, your good ideas may not be helpful. And indeed, they can be very harmful. And so both organizations pride themselves on getting out into the community and connecting with as many people as possible. And to do that, as board members, we need people who the public or the people that we want to work with support us. They trust us. They see us as credible and trustworthy. So when you're going out asking them about what their needs are, what resources do you need, that they trust that you're going to take that information and be helpful with it and not use them for some other purposes for your organization and kind of forget about them once you meet their goals. So that's why board members need to have that kind of background, that kind of understanding of the issues in the populations. So that diversity is really important to make sure those people are at the table. So for both of the organizations, they have policies to ensure this. So for the YWCA, it is written in a policy that at least half of the board members have to be from culturally diverse background, people of color. And currently on our board of 14 people, 9 women are BIPOC and 5 are not. For Isaac, they also have a policy that the task forces that they have, and they always have 3 issues. And for each issue that they're focusing on in a 2-year period, they have a task force. So housing is a task force that they're working on housing issues. Violence is one. And anti-racism is one. So you can see it's very important to us. For those task forces, it's written that the co-leaders of the task force, at least one of them has to be BIPOC. So same thing, it's the policy that's there in that organization that they try to uphold to ensure that this isn't an afterthought. It's something that's at the forefront of staffing the leadership in those organizations. And that's really important. One of the things that when you do that, when you're trying to get people who may not have been in leadership positions in other organizations, one of the issues you may find that there's some barriers, particularly sometimes for people of color or younger people. So I think a lot of organizations that I'm involved in, the population, the membership is older, non-BIPOC, people who are well educated and tend to have the time and the resources to volunteer. So it's kind of harder to find volunteers from your membership to step into leadership positions when they hold jobs, when they have young children, when they have to serve in other organizations in their communities and their churches. So we have to think about how do we remove the barriers for everybody to be in a leadership position? And that's a hard one. I think sometimes because you have some of the same people at the table in some boards, this time of day always works for us. So we're going to just keep doing what we've always done. This mode of meeting in person at lunchtime has always worked for us. When other people, that's just not ever going to be an option. So they might want to raise their hands to be a part of your leadership or membership, but because of the time of your meetings and how they're held, will never work for them. So they can't do that. So you just think about removing all of those barriers. Sometimes the barrier is Some organizations, the membership fee may be low, but you find out that they hold all of these events that you have to buy a ticket for and sell tickets to your friends for this fundraising or that fundraising. And for a lot of people, that's just not something that they would choose to do. And they would feel left out if they were part of an organization and they couldn't participate at that level. So that can be another barrier. And then I have to say, there's some organizations that I've been to as a new member, and because people all know each other very well, there are long established cliques. So you have an outsider who comes in, they're all eager to join because the person who invited them was friendly, but then you get to that membership meeting, or if you're on the board and no one else talks to you, no one else seems to be interested in you. So you feel like an outsider for a long time trying to get in. So there's just something to be aware of. And I've been to other meetings and it's been just the reverse. Everybody comes up and says something and tries to make a connection with me, to find out about me and how they can make a connection to get me to know me better. And of course, those are the organizations that I will tend to want to spend more time in and give more. So just think about that welcoming. And it is hard. You're there to see the people you already know, and we all shift into being very comfortable with that. If we want to change things to be more diverse, I think we have to think of stepping out of the box and that, and inviting more people to be up at the table, making them feel welcome. I have partnerships because I think that's really important. Each organization has their own mission and they focus on that very narrowly sometimes. But you would be surprised how many other people's organizations and their missions overlap with the work that you do. And we are fortunate in Kalamazoo that because of how our funding comes from our community foundation, we are encouraged to partner. We're encouraged to think about collective impact. They like to let us know that this other organization is also working on the same issue around housing. So if you're holding an event, are you talking to them and bringing all of those people to the table to work on the housing issue? So those partnerships are really important. And as you think about in your own community, what are those organizations that you can find to partner with? I mean, there's so many social justice organizations that do this type of work around racial justice. It could be around gender equity, economic justice, environmental justice, even criminal justice. All of those issues overlap with some of the league issues. So as you're thinking about expanding and making partnerships, just sort of look for that in your community, and that will be helpful. In fact, I think that was my own entree into league work, because being active in Isaac, we were invited to partner with the league for some candidate forums. And because of that, I was asked to be the moderator for a candidate forum. And because Isaac was involved in it and NAACP was involved in it, it made sense to me that I would be, a good person to do this. And when I accepted it, I started to learn more about the league at that event and wondered, why had I not been a member? And from there, I quickly signed up to be a member to learn more. So that's how partnerships can work. Other partnerships you can think about with other community service organizations. In our community, sororities and fraternities are very active. Kiwanis Club, Rotary, Junior League, all of those types of organizations. Community associations too, and they hold a lot of events. And so that's another place where the league can show up at some of those events and start to meet people who live in different sectors of the community. And then you'll get some diversity there, and find people who will also be interested in the league work. And of course, I represent the university, and there's always events going on and tabling at our events where the students are. And when we bring in speakers that bring in community members who come into the community or college campus just for that is another opportunity to meet people as well who may be from diverse backgrounds. And so once you start to find out who these partners are, co-sponsoring events with those partners, like I said, the example of the candidate forum, when they have events, make sure people from your organization go to those events, buy a ticket, attend that fundraiser, go to that dinner, to learn more about that organization and those people and make those connections. And then they're more likely to want to know what you're doing and become a part of that too as members. So I feel like once you have those partnerships and then you move into going to events and hosting events, you always want to make sure that if people find out about you, that you get their contact information, get them on your email list, so then you can start to invite them to more of your events. But the key is that make sure that those events appeal to everybody or different people. So the diversity in who you have as your speakers at that event. So once I get that email from your organization and I see there's a speaker that appeals to me, or there's an activity that appeals to me, then I'm more likely to show up. And so then you have me at your event. And then you get another chance to start to talk to me again. And then at the event, you can also share, how do you become a member? And from there, if I'm enjoying the people that I'm with, I start to say, yes, I think I do have time. And this is something I want to do with my time. I want to join and become a member. And then once you have me as a member, you need to have some reason to get me more engaged in your organization so that I show up to things regularly. So if you do have regular meetings, that's great. If you don't have regular member meetings, are there ways that I can start to volunteer to get to know more people in your organization, but not a big volunteer job? So sometimes I think you can scare people away by putting them right away, and they have to show up to something every week and have stuff done every time they come to the meeting. So you want to start out with something small. And then as people start to feel more comfortable, they do want to move into maybe a committee task and do that committee work. And then you start to build that leadership pipeline. Once you've been on a committee for a year or two, eventually the leadership position becomes open and people look at the people on the committee to step into that leadership position. Once you start to lead a committee, then people start to think about, wow, we see your leadership skills and you should also become a board member perhaps, because you now have shown that you have that kind of background and experience, and we want you to serve on the board. And in Kalamazoo, we have been successful with that model. We start to look at all of our membership, and then when there's openings on the board, we think about what are the things that the board needs at this time for which position, who do we know has that skill set, but then also looking at it with the lens to diversity. So then if we need this type of skill set, we know that this person also has a diverse identity. We think that would be a good person that we want to call first, offer it to them as we go down our list. And the same with the state league, we look at that as well. So it's not that different than how we look at other types of diversity when we're looking at age diversity, geographical diversity, when we talk about it at the state league. We wouldn't want everybody on the state board to be from Metro Detroit. That wouldn't work. So it doesn't make sense that we want everybody on the state board to be all white. So just how we look at other differences, we also need to think about that as well to make the most well-rounded board that we can and the most effective board to represent everybody in the membership. So moving into that board thing, we use at YWCA, we have a board matrix where we actually have people check off, what is your expertise? What is your experience with boards? What is your race? What is your age? And we can look across the matrix to see where our holes are on the board as we start to nominate new people and start to recruit new people to serve on the board. And then from there, if we've been cultivating people all along, when it's time to ask people, you're not surprised because you know that they are committed to your mission. You've seen that they've been experienced. They usually are ready to say yes. And so it's not a hard sell when you've done all this background work to cultivate people into a leadership position, such as the board. So I think, putting all those things together, and not scrambling at the last minute, and being careful about it. There's a link that I put in an article where someone talks about the danger of tokenism. And they just explain sometimes when you go up to a person of color, you're so excited that they're a part of your membership and you really want them to be on your board, but it's just because they're a person of color and you don't take the time to find out their other skill sets and what they bring. So then they do feel like a token. So when you do have those conversations with people, you should know what else they bring. You should know about their interest area, their expertise, their skill set, and tell them that you value the whole person. And, the diversity is value added. We do want your perspective, it's very important, but you also bring all of these other things that we value as well. So I will stop there.
Thank you so much, Regina. Excellent thoughts for us to consider. And the article that you mentioned, it's a blog, I believe.
Yeah.
Connie, my co-host, Connie Ferguson, and I didn't introduce her before, but I should. She posted that on chat, so that blog is out there for everyone to take a look at. Okay. It's my chance to, at this point, to introduce Patty O'Donnell. Patty is a member of the Leelanau County League, where she serves on the Equal Rights Advisory Committee. And in addition to that, she has over the years worked as an environmental stewardship director for the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians, the regional planner for the Northwest Michigan Council of Governments, and the region planner for the Michigan Department of Transportation. And her volunteer activities have included, in addition to the League, also the Watershed Center at Grand Traverse Bay, and Old Lesbian or Lesbians at Organizing for Change, where she's the manager of End White Dominance Zoom series. And she's also a member of their DEI committee and serves on the DEI team for League of Women Voters Michigan. So a lot of DEI experience there. Patty, you want to take it away?
Thank you, Mary Kay. And as Mary Kay said, I'm a member of the Old Lesbians Organizing for Change, or OLOC for short. We are an international organization with members in the United States, Puerto Rico, Canada, Western Europe, and Australia and New Zealand. And we have a long history of standing against oppression. We began in 1989 with the purpose to gather old lesbians to address issues of aging and ageism, and advance personal empowerment, and to celebrate the lives of old lesbians. So this new group was also concerned about other issues that affect old lesbians, such as racism, sexism, and poverty, as well as health, housing, and the environment. In the beginning, what carries on is the steering committee and members encouraged the reading of many books to learn and be aware. And they also did strategic planning and held training courses. Then over the years, they put forth an ongoing commitment to lesbians of color by starting a Lesbians of Color Day at our biannual gatherings, where the lesbians of color can gather. And also, OLOC provides travel assistance for the lesbians of color if they want to attend that day. In addition, OLOC has always provided financial assistance to any OLOC member that asks for that assistance so they can travel to the gatherings. We also have a monetary different levels to become a member. So for tracking demographics, it starts with the member application, which there are boxes to fill out. And you put your birth date because you have to be 55 years of age to join, race and ethnicity, and you don't have to just put one like is on a lot of other surveys. And also disability, you check no or yes. But as with any organization, large, medium, or small, we all have our issues. And since that beginning, it has been an ongoing challenge for OLOC to address the inherent racism and classism within the organization in order to attract and truly include a wide diversity of old lesbians. But we have continued to keep addressing these issues and working to bring all isms to the forefront of our political analysis and practice. This work includes some is the suggesting, reviewing, and the scheduling of keynote speakers, programs, workshops, and entertainment at our gatherings, our monthly Zoom events, topics, and presenters, our publications such as our monthly newsletter and quarterly newsletter, our brochure, and also our website. So with this history and the many activities that have occurred, we still hear that OLAC continues to be seen and described as a white, middle-class, able organization. So during the development of the most recent strategic plan, we updated our mission and vision statements. So our new mission statement is, OLAC represents lesbian elders in a spirit of inclusiveness to promote lesbian visibility. We come together to preserve our history, to confront social injustice, and to give and receive support for our later years. And our vision statement is, OLAC is an inclusive, multicultural rainbow of lesbian elders working in community for social justice. We've always, from the beginning, strived to that the steering committee is made up of 50% lesbians of color and 50% white lesbians, and that one of the co-directors is a lesbian of color and the other director is a white lesbian. And so we created a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee a couple years ago. And also that policy of 50-50 is within that committee too. So what we worked on to try to educate and make aware of OLAC trying to be inclusive is we created specific definitions regarding OLAC and lesbians of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity is the practice of including or involving lesbians from a range of different social and ethnic backgrounds, different ages, class structures, cultural backgrounds, geographies, physical abilities and disabilities, and religions. And equity means being fair and impartial, and that the resources are distributed based on the tailored needs of a specific audience. Equity recognizes that some communities will need more or different access compared to other communities. Inclusion is a practice or policy of improving equal access of opportunities and resources for lesbians who might otherwise be excluded or marginalized. Also, practice of behaviors and social norms that ensure people feel welcome. So the committee also updated, we had a respectful discussion statement for our Zoom events. And so we updated that to a dialogue etiquette statement. And so it says, for all OLAC communications and events, which is Zoom, our gatherings, our chapters, our groups, discussion groups, our committees, and our meetings, you are responsible for your own contribution, which means using I statements whenever possible. Every OLAC member and supporter is to do your part in creating an inclusive and welcoming environment for all through your words and actions. So please use respectful and considerate language at all times, which includes not using racial, ethnic, or any types of slurs. OLAC does support civil disagreements between participants and promotes reflective listening. Please note that individual opinions do not necessarily reflect the benefits, the beliefs, or attitudes of OLAC as a whole. Our committee is now working on consequences regarding the discussion etiquette, and that was requested by the lesbians of color. We also revised our brochure and helped with the updated website so we can develop welcoming, inclusive, and easily accessible introductory materials about OLAC. So some of the other activities that we do for diversity, equity, inclusion is, as Mary Kay said, we have the End White Dominance monthly anti-racist Zoom series. So we share information about how white dominance is incorporated in all United States institutions and systems. And so we have topic presentations, which have included institutional and systemic racism in housing, transportation, prisons, environmental. We've discussed cultures, Indigenous, anti-Semitism, Asian and Pacific Islanders, Latina communities, and Middle Eastern. Other topics have included interrupting racism, information suppression, voter suppression, interconnectedness, and focus on the hallmarks of white middle-class culture. So we also had a Nice Racism book club, and they discussed the book Nice Racism by Robin DiAngelo. And the next step that was voiced by this book group was how to incorporate opportunities within OLAC to learn how to do this work on a regular basis and stay accountable to each other. So as I've said, I've talked about our system within the organization, and we still continue to emphasize education and awareness because we need to just continually do that, and also promoting change in the individual member and also with the organization. And we continually remind ourselves that actions speak louder than words regarding an organization being seen as inclusive and welcoming. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. I appreciate those comments. Good food for thought. At this point, I'm going to introduce Kathy McAdam. Kathy is a member of the League of Women Voters of Grosse Pointe, and she is the chair of their DEI committee. In addition, Kathy has been, 20 years as a medical social worker at Rehabilitation Institute of Michigan, and she's been an advocate for assistive technology as well as for inclusion of people with disabilities in corporations. Her volunteer activities include not only the League, but also she chairs the Leader Dog Committee for the Lions Club, and she was recently appointed president of the board of the Greater Detroit Agency for the Blind and Visually Impaired. Kathy's also on the board of the League of Women Voters of Michigan and the DEI team. So Kathy, opening remarks.
Thank you. It's hard to believe sometimes that I'm 77 and still working. It feels like a full-time job many days, and I love it. So how did I get involved with the League of Women Voters? So I'm going to really talk specifically about the League and diversity and DEI from a disability perspective. So what happened was Wilhelmina, who's well known to both our local league and the Michigan League, was one day with a friend of mine at a gym, and my friend said, yeah, my friend Kathy says that sometimes she thinks about joining the League of Women Voters, but she really doesn't know much about it. And all of a sudden I get this phone call, and Wilhelmina says, I understand you might be interested in the League of Women Voters and that you've done some DEI work in the past. And there you go. That's all it took. And because of my DEI interests, I actually was more involved in that piece of the work initially than I was in totally understanding the League's work that came later. And so sometimes the entry into a group may not specifically be related to the mission of that group. Although the DEI efforts for the League were beginning in, I think it was 2018, and I came in late in 2019. And I had done a fair amount of DEI work, so I just, it was a good fit for me to begin with that. So of course, a lot of my focus in my work and interest has been with disability organizations. And the thing about disability is it crosses all those groups we've already been talking about. I like to say we're everywhere, because disability can touch as through birth or later on in life. The Americans with Disabilities Act defines disability quite broadly and had included chronic illnesses. In fact, in the 80s, when AIDS was such an issue, it was really helpful for that community, for the gay community, to help us reach out and understand some of the discrimination issues across more than one thing, and that AIDS and other chronic illnesses also were part of the disability experience. So that began to broaden the scope of what disability might look like. I had in my notes that those of us with disabilities are about 20% of the population. That actually, it's about 53 million people, according to the Centers for Disease Control, that identify with a disability. But that can vary. If you're in an area where there's a lot of poverty, those numbers can go up as high as 31% for some communities. So if you're looking at census data, you can see quite a disparity across different groups. So how do you address gaps in the diversity related to disability? So one of the things I was thinking about was, I'm going to be talking about that, and I'm also going to be talking a little bit more about developing board leadership and some of the resources that I'm going to share with you. But I want to start by talking a little bit about things to think about if you want to attract people with disabilities to any organization. It really helps to make sure that your meetings and events are welcoming to people with disabilities and accessible. So I shared with you in some of the links that were put on the chat some information about, very specific information about making sure your meetings are accessible. It's a little tricky with our online access. For example, most people would not know that if anything is put in the chat, I will hear it. That's why we asked you to not use the chat while I'm speaking, and that can be interrupted. But that's okay for most times, because I can usually do both if I'm not presenting the information. But what is more tricky is people will show slides or share screens. None of that information is available using my talking screen reader technology. So unless I'm asked if I need an accommodation to participate in a meeting, I would not get that information. So my accommodation would be to ask you to send me the slides ahead of time. And that's a well-kept secret, that Zoom does not have that access. Sometimes reaching out to people with disabilities is challenging just in terms of language. The US League had a definite definition of diversity that includes the word ability status in their beginning definition of diversity. They later on used the word disability. And I questioned the use of that, because for some people, if they don't see who they are in the first paragraph, they don't go any further. Now, I'm well aware that many people do not identify with a disability. Even though those stats I gave you are accurate, they may themselves not identify. And it is a struggle. I mean, I had my own issues with that growing up. But what I've come to learn is that disability has a political statement. It is a historically discriminated against group. The Americans with Disabilities Act didn't occur until 1990. So when I was not given a job application in the 70s, when I applied for a job, I was refused even an application. I had no recourse. Thank God that changed. So thinking about accessible meetings, and I give you some information that you can look up on that, is very important. It can be everything from using the closed captioning that we're using tonight, being sure your venue is wheelchair accessible. You'd think that would be solved in most situations today, but it isn't. Even a lot of our voting sites aren't accessible. So thinking ahead of time about those things, how you create your flyers and web information. There's a lot of material out there on how to make information accessible, but it is a little bit tricky. It's not something that is always obvious. So trying to find people who can help with that can be very important. And I was very pleased to work with the Michigan League on some of the communication materials that we put together and adding some accessible material. So we are continually improving how we reach out. I gave you some, one of the links that in the resources that I put up on the screen is for voting resources for people with disabilities. And many of you might have been involved in some of the training with Detroit Disability Power. They're a very well-known organization in this area, and they have a great deal of material on their website that can be very helpful. And one of the things that I find most helpful is they have an inclusive campaign guide. It's very long, it's very detailed. You can buy it for 10 bucks or 15 bucks or make a donation. You can even request it free if you have to. It's a really valuable piece of information. And chapter 7 in that guide also includes a lot of material about how to reach people with disabilities in your media and other information. And then I've also given you a link to the American People with Disabilities website on their voting issues. It's called Rev Up, and it's a national event to reach out to include people with disabilities in voting. This is a huge issue. The number of people with disabilities who vote is still incredibly low. I'm not remembering the exact statistics, but it's in the somewhere between 16 and 20% of people with disabilities are voting. It's way down. And if you have a chance to get involved with Detroit Disability Power's programs, they've done a lot of work with the Carter Center and can give you much more information. And I think some of you already have been involved with that. And then sometimes when you're looking at approaching a board and trying to do some general education, you need to get creative. So one time the DEI committee I was on, we were talking about what can we do for a 5-minute discussion. And we came across this article from the New York Times on stuttering. And it just happened to be related to President Biden's issues and disability related to his stuttering. Partly how he was early on hiding it or feeling like it was done with. And also led into discussion of how it impacted other young people and how hidden disabilities can also be a challenge. So when you're thinking about including people with disabilities in any organization, one of the most important things is that they see themselves somewhere in your media. So for example, I've given you some information about other programs that with good websites and good information. Even if you do not currently have somebody in your league who has a disability, but you put that link on your page, somebody's going to say, oh, they do include me. Maybe I want to contact them. And sometimes it's as simple as that first question. So I went from being a member of the DEI committee to chairing it to being asked to be on my local board and somehow over to the Michigan board. I don't know what's next, but I'm pretty busy. So I'm probably that's gonna be my league work at this point, and I'm gonna leave it at that so we can open it up for questions.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Excellent thoughts. At this point, I am going to open it up to questions. I'd like you to use the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen, and I'll call on you as I see your hands raised. Please indicate if you want a specific member of the panel to address your question, or if you want to open it up to all three. Well, I'm going to ask a question of Patty. Patty, how did you come to be a member of the League of Women Voters?
Reading about them in the county paper and what topics they were doing. And so right before I retired, I took some comp time and went to their meetings because they're at noon. And it was the Women's History Month one that I was very interested in. And when I arrived, I didn't really know anybody. I knew of one person, but one of the board members came right up to me and welcomed me and sat with me and started, a little conversation. And that's like, I want to do this. So that's how I got in the local league.
Okay, good. Any other questions for the panel? Yes, Janice?
I don't see the little hand signal on my lower part here. So my question is, for those of you who have really moved the time of your meetings, I'm wondering if there's a time of day that any of you have found is really a better time to attract a wider diversity of our membership, because that's something, our meetings are at noon, and you know who can come at noon. It's us retired women. And that's really not necessarily the group we're trying to reach out to. So I would appreciate any thoughts on that. Thank you.
Well, for YWCA and Isaac, they are evening meetings with hybrid options. So if you are someone who has childcare and you want to participate and you need to participate from home, that's helpful too. So evening seems to be a good slot. And like after the dinner hour, because a lot of parents have, responsibilities right after school. So like a 4:30 or 5 meeting is not ideal either. More like 7. Mm-hmm.
Anyone else want to offer an idea on that question? Timing of meetings, making it more open to diversity.
I'll raise a question for attracting younger people. Are people finding that evening times are not as good? probably flexible.
Mary Kay, I'm not sure if you can see it, but there are 3 people with hands raised. Can you see those?
I can now. Mhm.
Great.
Let's see. Let me start with Sue Smith.
Thank you, Mary Kay. I wanted to mention something about where we meet. Many years ago, when I was involved with what was then the Ann Arbor League, we used to meet at the Women's City Club. And then we did some focus groups, and we found out that people thought, you know, you had to be rich and white and I don't know what all, in order to be a league member, because look where you were meeting.
Mm.
And so we found that out. We stopped meeting there and started meeting at the public libraries. And we found that people felt more welcome in a place like the library where they were used to going anyway. And there wasn't this feeling that somehow they didn't belong. So I think we have to think about where we meet as well as when. And I agree that timing is a problem unless you have different events at different times during the day, sometimes at noon, sometimes in the evening, sometimes late afternoon, to appeal to different parts of the membership, because everybody, you know, has their own life to lead and doesn't work out the same for everybody.
Thank you, Susan. Carla?
Hi, I just wonder how we measure success. I mean, there are obviously many different aspects to diversity, and some of them we probably do a better job on than others. I'm guessing on diversity concerning disabilities, we don't do a very good job. And I suspect on diversity based on economic status, we do a horrible job. How do we measure success? And based on that, how do we alter what we do in the future?
This is Kathy. I actually was going to talk a little bit about tracking people with disabilities. It's not easy because a lot of people do not identify as having a disability, or they have an invisible disability and you just don't even know what's going on. So you could do a survey and try to ask some specific questions beyond, do you have a disability, yes or no, which is a good start. But there might be some other caveats you could try to see if people respond to. But even in the disability community, it's challenging to get that data.
I'm going to move over to Cheryl.
Yes, this is not so much around, I mean, it is around DEI, but in terms of voting, Kathy, with the report, and I haven't read it yet, but the one that Detroit Disability Power did, what would you say, especially, I know Detroit was one of the areas they looked at, and I thought others too around the
Yes.
state, but
Yeah.
what would be the 1 or 2 things that we really should be focusing on for voting encouragement and support and monitoring? I mean, what is the most important thing in getting people out to vote and helping to protect their rights in this? In the Detroit area, if you can speak
Yeah.
to that.
That's a very good question. And there is actually, we can try and find the shorter handout that gives some simple to-do things to look for. There were a lot of mobility issues that came up in that survey, that people couldn't park and get out of their cars if they had a wheelchair, without wheelchair access. Sometimes the door that was supposed to be the one you go into to get into the voting area was not accessible. Maybe it was a heavy door, or you got in the door and then because it was a school building, there were either obstacles in the way, so you couldn't get past where you needed to go. So a lot of it was wheelchair access, and many of the things were actually fairly simple fixes. So one of the recommendations from the survey was to start with some of those issues and not necessarily some of the more complicated things. The use of the voting access terminal, the VAT, was highlighted quite a bit because many times it wasn't set up properly, or people weren't taking advantage of it to use it. It was originally set up for people with disabilities, but it could just be that you have low vision, and you don't identify as a person with a disability, but you just have trouble reading, or you might have a learning disability, and listening to the information would do better than trying to read it. But we haven't done a very good job of educating people on using those machines, other than those of us who love them because we got to vote independently for the first time in our lives.
Thank you.
And Sarah, you have your hand up?
I did. Thank you. This is maybe more of just a comment, ultimately a question to the entire group. In appreciation of Dr. Nelson's comments regarding the path, if you will, to developing and maintaining a diverse board, that you have to attract diverse speakers to your membership meetings, which would hopefully bring in new diversity to those meetings, where you would then have a chance to court those attendees to become members, and ultimately engage those members to be on committees and develop leadership roles, which would lead them to be a board member. All starting with this idea of attracting diverse speakers. So going out to the group and maybe to Dr. Nelson, for a league, I'm with the Detroit League, attracting diverse speakers to speak on the importance of voting, without, my concern is without looking like we're pandering. And if anybody's had any success in reaching out to speakers like that, like diverse speakers, that ultimately does bring in new members.
I think if you explain your intention behind wanting to hear their point of view and how to support them, it won't look like pandering. So I think it's just how you make the request or the offer. And I know Kalamazoo, we've been successful. And sometimes you ask the person in your group who is a member of that group to reach out because they already have a relationship.
Thank you.
Okay. At this point, I'm going to ask each of the panel members to just give a short closing statement. I'll start with, oh, sorry. Denise, I missed you. Did you want to ask a question? Okay. We'll start with Regina. Just a couple of closing comments.
Sure. I think those organizations that have been very successful with diversifying their membership and leadership have DEI in their mission, DEI in their policies, and DEI in their practices. So it's not just the one piece over here. You have to think about integrating it all the way through your organization, and put that in your strategic plan. It's possible.
Thank you, Regina. Patty, your final thoughts?
Yep. Based on that, I also to emphasize education and awareness, because there's still members who aren't even aware, and then we have the unconscious racism and classism, because that's been bred into us and socialized to that. And to continually remind ourselves as an organization and an individual that our actions speak louder than words regarding an organization being seen as inclusive.
Okay. And Kathy?
I guess one of the thoughts I had was that maybe some of the organizations that I've listed, and there's one in Lansing called Michigan Disability Rights Coalition. It's mymdrc.org. And they do a lot of education and work around disability concerns. I didn't see anything currently on their website around voting, but they do a lot with leadership development and sometimes looking at other organizations and what skills they bring and how we might offer a presentation or a talk on voting to them is another way to get in the door.
Okay. Well, with that, I just want to, on behalf of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion team of the League of Women Voters of Michigan, I want to thank you all for joining us this evening. The DEI team has put together a set of 5 questions that we'd like to ask you to fill out before you leave today. These are things that help us to plan for future programs. So I'm going to post that right now. But again, I just want to thank everybody for being here and for participating. Thank you so much.